Yeah, so shall we start? Okay, so like we said last time, we're going to go through the Kimbo's explanation of the practical Buddhas and the other ones. It seems like there's a lot of links, but actually he's making very short sentences. He speaks very short sentences. It's not going to take that long, I think. Is everyone there, or shall we wait a little bit more? Can we start?
Perhaps, I don't know, 3 minutes tolerance or something like that. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, it's going to be recorded anyhow. So let's start and then, so that we don't get late afterwards for lunch. Oh, can you hear? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
So Kimbo was saying that, asking the translator to show the the list of 12 interdependent links, because he wants to make a short presentation of the 12 links before linking it with the Dharma mantra. And so when we talk about the samsara, then it is we say that the samsara is turning around in circles of causes that produce the results, etc. And it is actually through the 12 interdependent links that this process is happening. And so, for example, it all starts with ignorance. And so if you want to condense the meaning of what ignorance is, we can say that it is not being able to understand properly the way that phenomena exist. And so that is how we can understand what ignorance is. And it can be, for example, the fact of clinging to the existence of an I, where there is no I at all, or clinging to the existence of phenomena where there are absolutely no phenomena existing.
Can you make his audio a little louder? Thank you.
Yeah. I'm sorry, let me know. Maybe I'm not sharing the audio directly from Zoom.
But it sounds better now. Thank you, sorry.
But I was, let me start on, yes, that's what's happening. Okay. And so, for example, the fact of not knowing that, yeah, I didn't take notes from the beginning of this. Let me try again.
Teni le junri che pena gewal teni dewa tang dipal teni donghan ju nge lende ke tong to ha mo nge lo mihi pe lo tila yam marik pa segret marik pe dal te khona ni mo marik dal lende mo marik pa ni yoris.
Yeah. And so, and then when it comes to cause and effect, the fact of not knowing that negative actions will produce suffering and that positive actions will produce happiness. This is also one type of ignorance. And when it comes to ignorance, there are two types. We talk about the ignorance that is not knowing or ignorant about the nature of phenomena, and the ignorance of being ignorant about the law of cause and effect.
Tene marik pa ti ki change ti ju se bala teni dojes se the lel ko.
And so through this ignorance acting as a cause or as a condition, then the next link is produced, which is formation. And when we talk about formation, we actually mean actions, karma.
Sorry, what did you say?
I'm sorry?
When you talk about formations, we are talking about
actions or karma. Did you get it? Yeah?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Letela some shigres, Sonam Gilete, Clava me, they would take Junda Wutan, Sonam my planting, as soon some of my Jessica lay down, Mayo lay said it is young Kong command Jessica later to the shigres in the jazz.
Yeah, the volume is low. Okay. And so as for actions or karma in general, what we say is we usually categorize karmas in three types: meritorious actions, meritorious karma, non-meritorious karma, and unshakable or immovable karma. And we say that the meritorious actions will give the result of being reborn in the realms of God and humans. Non-meritorious actions will give the result of being reborn in lower realms, and the immovable actions will give the result of being reborn in the higher realms, meaning the form and formless worlds. Usually, we categorize actions into these three kinds.
Teni Tata Tere Maripa Tanduze number Shiba Senua number Shiba Sejute Ta Tindi Vike Le Telatini so Lutini Ditana Pena Mahanga which is China Mahangala Tombo Mahangala in some Gen Tombo Supercat the Namhitana Yubeka Namhit and Digital Progress.
And so we had ignorance, then formation, and now the next one is consciousness. And so when we talk about consciousness here, it is from the fact that in the formation element, we accumulated actions, and then these actions that we have accumulated make us be reborn somewhere. And so at the very beginning of very first moment when we are going to be reborn, or let's say if we were to be reborn through a womb, then the very first moment when we enter this womb, so the consciousness of this very first moment of entering the womb is what we refer to here by consciousness.
Teni Namhi Tatombo, not Kiva Leon, the Kiva Lampe Tombo, Nam Precipa Tende like Kubris, Namhidi.
这里说的
And so here, consciousness means the very first moment of consciousness, that is when we take rebirth on somewhere. That occurs when we take rebirth somewhere.
Then minzuk sejite tampu kewale ne ma nganda wujile tangko tom sambe ke keji tampu te ke jisla ye dewe ke meng cha te ke namchi chorwan do hin do ze zuk sejite zuk te ta ngaso tendi ye de te ni zondela ma rambri ke ta thogura dawa mamur ma tomni kha do mai da na la so be che to so ma de pe par ni ke par tong ji ba de la minzuk chigres
那接下来
And so the next one is name and form. And so so we still continue. We after this very first moment of entering the womb or taking this rebirth, then so the first moment is consciousness, and then after that, and then we need to develop the body and to grow our body inside the womb until we are born, right? And so this is the moment between the first instant of entering the womb and the birth. The period between these two things is what we call name and form. And that for name, what we mean is the consciousness, the sensation, the mental formations, and yes, and the thoughts. And so the other four aggregates are what is called here name, and the first aggregate, which is form, is form in name and form. And so from the moment that we are in the womb of our mother until we are born, then we need to develop all our senses, like our mouth, our eyes, etc. And these need to develop until they are fully, we're able to open our mouth and eyes, and then until they are fully developed. And so this is name and form.
Tene ngal drop sa ditam chenche se jite minzuk coming na son la sobata chu dene ha kogu yorwa tanga chu teson chuja no ta dena ha kogre tende ke minzuk to dene zon de la ngue so make to ke zok ma thong na make zok to make tang yul to yong nam chi son ten ri pa de chen do gre te ma the pe ngwe ni pa de chenche se gre chenche to
那接
And so once our body fully developed in the womb, and then so after name and form, and then there's this six senses senses, the senses, the six senses senses. And so this is what we can see and analyze and observe through the modern technology that science provided. We can see how the eye organ functions, etc. And so here, when we talk about six sense senses, we're not talking about the moment when the eye organ is working and is actually perceiving an object, but we are talking about these the senses just before they actually enter into contact with their respective object, and then perception occurs. So, because when there is this contact and when there is perception, then we are already in the later links. But here, when we talk about six senses, we are at the moment just before these sense organs and functions are actually perceiving something.
Tene rikpa sejute karsuguro yul da ombo number hipa sam train dana yul the tajonen bepena homborendo the seporendo the porendo the pomorendo the combarendo the tatindi tajo ya yorwa tele rikpa segures indete.
And so when we talk about contact, it is this very decisive perception or the decision that what we perceive is this or that very clearly that we're talking about. It's like when we see something, it's very clear to us that this is a boy and this is a girl, this is a house, this is this and that. And so just the fact of perceiving and having this decision about what the object, our perception is here what is called the link of contact.
Tati rikwa tela make ten rikwa ta nawa ta na che umpo gonga kalangala jente tokala rikwa to yore ta tindi ke rikwa te yude che chorwa se tela teni tene pena make yapunda oji thona del tene gawa che ya chowa chi grawa ta dukya den thona dongha chi grawa tene ke chowa pena tindi che rikwa tela jose bala teni chung chorwa tena chowa se ke chowa de do tong som.
And so through this contact, then, through the contact of the six sense organs with their respective objects, and then come what is called feeling. So, for example, when eye consciousness comes into contact with form, or the ear consciousness with sound, etc. And so each of these five consciousness plus the mind have their own objects. And so we have these six types of objects that can be perceived. And so when the perception of one of these six consciousness with each object occur, then there is a feeling that occurs, that happens. And for example, when we see something with our eye consciousness, if it is a good object or a pleasant object, then we feel happy about it. And then when it is an unpleasant object, then we feel unhappy about it. And so this is the feeling is this result of the contact. And usually when we talk about feelings, there is agreeable, disagreeable, and neutral feelings.
Tennis stick pass say Sora Devala Garnish, Garnish, Naranso Shanchayorwa. Then Sora don't have to part Taran de Shanchayorwa. Don't have upon never be Shancharging, Sora like Shanchayo de Villa stick pass face.
Don't la Kayaki Twitch.
Pena Tangazo Namju, Kusumbu, Dundu Yorwa, Kusumbu, Chaya, Sora Kusumbu, the Gagdua. Then they Shanchayorwa, then the taking the Sora Kibo, Sora Koran, Sora Kibo, you want to Shanchayorwati. Sora don't have part and do Shanchayor, Sora the Chadi, Lutile, Sipa, Sipa.
And then the next one is craving. And so when we are happy because we perceive an object that is pleasant, then we have this craving of wanting more. And then when it is an unpleasant feeling that we have the craving of wanting to get rid of that feeling. And when it is neutral, we have the feeling, the craving of more neutral as well. And so the translator asks what kind of craving we can have to neutral feelings. And Kempo explained that it is just like when we are very calm, when everything is very silent and calm and nice, then we want to keep these states very silent and calm. And so we have a craving, we have an attachment to maintaining a very quiet moment. And so this is the same kind of craving that we can have when we want more of something that is pleasant, or the same kind of craving as well as when we want to get rid of something unpleasant.
Then Lamba said it, Tan Soala gown, Soraka Julaga, Jutal, Tosola Lamsom, Gagarwa, Tangasupena Lamba said, Sora Deva, you will be Jutas, Pichagana, Kala Chimbul Gaya Jindoa. The Kala Chimbo Karich Gars and Kala Chimbo Sana, Soa Chibu Yungu, Kala Chimbul Gaya, Lord Navuta. Then I get a result, Jose Jumbo Gaya and Navuta. That data tell us about Soa Deva Chibutas and Yuan we good to like Kinji Chapu and Lamba Chipres.
And next comes becoming, or yes, no, grasping, sorry. After craving, grasping. And so this grasping is actually an attachment or craving towards the cause of what is happiness, what brings us happiness. Because if something brings us happiness, just like, let's say, some good food that will give us some pleasure when we eat it. So as soon as we have identified a cause of some pleasant feeling like good food for us, then we right away we get attached, or we start grasping at the cause of this feeling, and so we start liking good food, and so we start to think, oh, I like this food and that food, etc. Even though it doesn't bring directly some pleasant feeling, but knowing that it is the cause of a pleasant future feeling, then we start grasping to these things. And so it's true for food, but also for touches, and so for kind of textures. So when textures are agreeable, then we start to cling to things that have this kind of textures, etc. And so the attachment or craving that we have to causes of pleasant feelings is grasping here.
Then sipa sejute dendikin chowa shencha tsula teni tayang le sabdasaya juyorwa o tila kogoris.
And then birth. So birth here, sorry, not birth, becoming. Becoming here is the actions that we will accumulate through craving and grasping.
Then kiwa sejute dendikin le tsula teni yangcha to pumpu nga mahangal inchot nyansum jorwe ki kiwa le dendijila kiwa si kogoris.
And then birth is the creation of our 5 aggregates of one of our birth, just like when we enter the womb of our next mothers. And so this is what is here called birth.
Then gahi seju ga seju gain pera naso yin jondo yala kogure shi seju din naso yin jondona soko ombong gaba de shi segore ta gahi si nam nyom de jeon de ta na juni thamba yores stand yana juni.
And so the next one is aging and death. And so aging is when we get old, becoming old. And then death here is when the organ that maintains us alive, the life organ, stops to function. And so that is death. And so here aging and death are put together, which gives us altogether 12 links, 12 elements.
Oh, ta tendi yana juni ti no ni tandela dancing de sound na juki cha ji dang jebu ki cha number ni se chugo yores.
Na sha
And so when we look at these 12 links, and then we can make 2 categories out of these 12. The category of the elements that are cause, and the categories of those that are results.
Pena maripa dan doze ni bote maripa de nyomo bare doze de lere tingi de tingi de joche tani jepa da gowa chuba sombote rambari de yon sipa da lemba te bote ni bote nyomo re sipa de lere on ditna ting apote jores.
那比如说呢，
And so out of these 12, the first one, ignorance, second formation, are causes. And then on top of those, then we have to add the craving and grasping, which are negative emotions, and becoming, which is action. And so these 5 are categorized as causes.
Then number shipat mizo to change the ripat sora tedanam jevre did kare maripat to zelatin the chong yorba. Taking the ma chuki to chuni the kiva the gashi mutan jevre. Then the sun and jevu chatilla ding to my yodes.
And then the other ones, consciousness, name and form, 6 sense sources, contact, feeling, birth, aging, and death. So the 11th and 12th. All of these are results because, for example, consciousness is the result or comes from the previous one from ignorance, or sorry, yes, and the formation is the result of ignorance, and so because of that, they are called, they are categorized as the results.
Chesantini in the sanata, not so young, no Koran for part in road, Lehao Chadius.
Okay, so now that we have presented things in this way, then we can go back to the sutra itself, and then things are going to be easier, as you see.
Then the Tanata pen and Dohnoni, Chuna Konda, Jusong, Konda Jusong Tedani, or Terwa.
Hesitating.
Chu con Jusong Tedani, Judo Tango coin, but the Yi got the Gazochin Picason, some Pizana. Ta Chunam, Chu Kong Sate, Chunam Sagitake, Ta Tangu, Tendiana, Junik Nani, Tendiana, Tata Dun the Tenures, Pena Tendiana, Sumba, Yewa, Nawa, Tupa, Dambache, Chuki Juni the Jet, did Dumbote, Chu. Chunam Konda said, Revoteda, Chuteda, si, Quadriti, Chunam, Chu Kong Juson said, Chu Kong Sayate, de la Cogores.
And so now coming back to these verses that present the yes, no, it's not here. Okay. So this, yeah. So coming to this, this verses that says all phenomena that arise from causes or that are produced from causes. When we say all phenomena or whatever phenomena, Chugam or Chunam, then here out of the 12 interdependent links, we are talking about the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, the 11th, and the 12th, meaning all the 7 links that are in the category of the results. And so when in these 4 verses in the mantra, it says all those phenomena, all the phenomena, we are talking about the resultant links.
Gusong said the Gute, Jungal, then Jungres, Higuris, Junga.
And so there is all phenomena that appear through causes. And so here that appear through causes, we are talking about the 5 causes, the 5 links that are causes, categorized as causes. And so, yes, these 5 causes.
Junga put the courage than a Mari Padang. But the Jesita, Pena, Tendi, Yana, Tombo, da Nibaje. Then is Sepal, Lempa Sepa City, Ma, Dumba, Jepa, Gohatirendua, Marida, Jepa Goachuatirendua, or did Naputini, Jutelatini, Jumbares.
And so these 5 causes are first ignorance and formation, meaning the first 2 elements. the first two links, and then afterwards the craving, grasping, and becoming, which are the 8th, 9th, and 10th elements. And so these 5 are identified here in this verse as being the causes from which the phenomena have arisen.
Tene Teda ki Jutun Tengu se Sheon Sana, Teda Seati Tendi Tata Yana, Tombon Jevik Charchu, Dumbo Tetang, De Jude, Jut Seati Tendi Tata Young Jut Chayana Ayua, Judo Jepa, De Pa Go, Kaya Wayne, Shawan Yang de Bon, Tawa Yang de Top of Uris, take Namjung Tendi Tenguris.
And so the verse continues by saying whatever phenomena that are produced by causes, and there's the cessation from themselves and their causes. And so the cessation from themselves and the causes is the next bit that we're going to go through now. And when we say themselves, and so we're actually talking about the 7 links that are categorized as results. And so their causes is the 5 elements that are categorized as causes. And yes, and then the cessation is saying that, so here what is being presented is the cessation of the causes and resultant interdependent links. And so when these cease, then the result is the nirvana, or beyond suffering, the state beyond suffering. And so here, when the verse is saying, and the cessation of themselves and their causes, what is being referred to is the 12 interdependent links that go towards yes, freedom.
Teni Pena, Tatani Share of the Chu Kung Jujong Tedaki said the Kuni Nyomo Tendi Yalajuni, the Tembares.
And so when we said before, all phenomena that are produced by causes, and these present the 12 interdependent links in the direction of the production of the samsara. Yes.
Dada ki Jodon Tango Poinba said the Namzong dependent unit 10 years, number 2.
And then after that, when it says, and the cessation of themselves and their causes, then we are talking about the 12 interdependent links in the order that leads to liberation.
Namjong Tendi Yalajuni said the Kaneki Gorisana, Mari Pangana, the Jengagore, the J Gana, number Kibangana, Mizo Gana, Jenchengana, Ripangana, Swangana, Sipangana, Lembagana, Kiwanga, Gashin Gaya, Yoroma. Or tell Namjong Tendi Yalajuni Higres.
第一给堂泰国看一把的把对吧？当中给
Rela, Red, take it in.
拉索，对不起，刚才说错了，就是
Okay. And so when we are talking about the 12 interdependent links in the order of in the direction of liberation, what we actually mean is that we start by ignorance and say if ignorance ceases, and then formation ceases. If formation ceases, then consciousness ceases. If consciousness ceases, then name and form ceases. If name and form ceases, then the sixth sense, the sixth sense cease. and if that ceases in turn, and then contact ceases, and then if contact ceases, grasping, craving ceases. If craving ceases, then grasping ceases. If grasping ceases, then becoming ceases, and then if becoming ceases, then birth ceases, and if birth ceases, then aging and death cease. And so that is the 12 interdependent links in the order of going to towards liberation.
Oh, that in the Kyuku, Jujong, say, Tinda, Kuninyomo, tended the Sukuson Retina, the Yihibe Katsavare, Tedaki Jodo, Tango, Koyan Paso, the Namjong, the Tendi Juni, the Susan Retinaya, the Yihibata, Gazon Chimpo, the Rich Sombares, and the thing they get the Rich in the Tambareson.
And so these 12 interdependent links in that they go towards liberation as presented by all phenomena that are produced by causes. Who presents that? It is the Tathagata who has taught that. And so we move on to the next part of the 4 lines. And the cessation of themselves and their causes who presented that, then it is the great renunciation. And so it is the remaining part of the 4 verses are saying that.
Tendi Tape Chagana, Tangas, Namju, and Tendi and I gum, la gum, Jibia, gum, Rambayong, Yunguris.
No.
And then usually when we talk about the 12 interdependent links, there is this idea that we have to meditate on the 12 interdependent links. And so there is this way of meditating, or the stages of meditation on the 12 interdependent links.
Pena Kuninyomo tended Lunjung to Gambata, Ludos with Gambata, and the number E Gantong Yuris.
比如说呢，有流转的
And for example, when we talk about the 12 interdependent links that leads towards samsara, then there are 2 ways of meditating upon them, either in the order of production or in the reverse order.
Tati Gombrasabala Tampo Tangu Kondo Shebana, then the Yana Juni put the Kare made the Suso Tombo Simbachi Jego Gravas.
那要
And so as the meditation itself, what happens when we meditate on these 12 links, then at the very beginning, what is required, of course, is to identify clearly what are each of these 12 links, right?
Any day she's a Yugula Tendi Yanajuni Lungung the Mark Gom Giva the Let Howard.
那如果我们
And then when we have clearly in our minds identified the 12 links, then it is very easy to meditate on the 12 links in the order in the order of production.
Penangazu Namju Ong Gombik Negab so Oak Nana Jontina, Sam Nana, old Nona Jong Tate, my old Nona Gypty. Then the Nala Ne, Sella Chintis in the Tat region ma Mipat the Digitane, Gomdon to your was.
那比方
And so, for example, when we meditate on the breath, and then we usually, there's this way of doing it that explains that when you inhale, and then you should consider that your mind is coming inwards, and then when you exhale, then your mind is going outwards. There's this way of meditating.
They Gomdon the United Ne Gom Segres.
那如果
And so this type of meditation is called the shamatha meditation.
pen
라서
tendi yana chuni tata longjong longdo tu gamba yana lantong gam segres.
And then when we meditate on the 12 interdependent links, either in the order of in the direction of samsara or liberation, it is called meditation on vipassana.
这个是属于观的禅修。
Te gamtong de ta mishi che meres.
그는 이 미세기
Mishi
Yes, okay. Yeah, and then so there is nothing that is complicated about meditating on these 12 links.
pen tata nga su tini ma rempachi de yo patina ke marik para la tini duze ten jongu yores marik bi juchin se bala tini duze de jongu yore duze juji la sa kin duze ki kin la tini number shi pa jongu yore number shi kin la tini minzo li kin tini chenche li tini rigwa tini tadi chine ma rambar kin da sam ka na la rambar kin da tele tini ten jongu re tele tini ten jongu re tini marik bi kin tini ga shi pa da rambar kin da tadi ma gum na tended the longjong gum sigres.
And so, for example, when we meditate on the 12 interdependent links, starting from ignorance and say, okay, out of this 12 link, the first that arises is ignorance. And then once there is ignorance, then formation starts. Then one formation starts, then consciousness arises. Then one consciousness arising, name and form appears. And then after name and form, 6 sense sources, and after contact, feeling, craving, etc. And so going from the top downwards, progressively one after the other, and then in our mind thinking, okay, now because there's this, then that happens, etc. So that occurs, and so meditating and thinking like that is called meditating on the 12 interdependent links in the production order.
Tene te karaso longjong to gum se go jumsin te tang aso gandhi tena yana rambar kin da mare pal tene do zel tene number chi pandi zen ma rambar kin da nan ju nyamni thamji nyamni chen ki ga gam yo la gamba na ye ga tan chi ngaso dadan di khorwa ki junde te de rang che go yoris.
And so the reason why we call that way of meditation in the order of production, it is because, as we have seen, so the meditators and the yogis, when they meditate on the 12 interdependent links, they start by ignorance and see and practice the fact that ignorance brings forth formation, which brings forth consciousness, etc. And so progressively from ignorance we reach until the end of the links. And so according to this way, yes, and so this way of meditating from ignorance downwards, not only is it this way that meditators and yogis practice, but it also corresponds to the way that samsara actually is created. And so it corresponds to the production of samsara.
Ta tendeji gong yung di te gupan da kare yung resena tendeji na gong do di tena tadan di tata le do nyamo bangin devon tat thopate ta dongha demba gashila so pat rendo pate hakko yung res.
And so the result of having meditated on the 12 interdependent in this way is that we're going to become aware, and we're going to be to see clearly that the result of negative emotions and negative actions is going to be the last element, which means aging and death and the suffering.
Tene yang gom su ta kun nyomo bate ludus gom se aji yores ludus gom.
然后呢，还有一种成
And there is another way of meditating on these 12 links, which is the reverse order. And so the way of meditating in the reverse order is starting by the last one by the bottom and coming back up.
Pena gashite kangla tini chumbare sena kewala tini chungwa kewala tini chungre sam sanno kewala kangla tini chungre sena sipala tini chungre sam sipati kangla tini chungre sena lambala tini chungre samne samne ta sanno tru gamjene man juniya tindijne mari to padliya gamya ji yorwa tila ludus gam segres.
And for example, we can start looking at aging and death and then try to think where do they come from, and then coming to the conclusion in our meditation, in our thinking, that it actually comes from birth. And so thinking in our mind and then resting our mind and meditating upon that as well. And then after that, we look at birth and then think, ask ourselves, where does birth come from? What does birth come from? And then we come to the conclusion that it comes from becoming, which in turns come from grasping, etc. And so we go upwards in the reverse order.
Tenin de la lugdu se go jimsin karesana ngaso ta gam jitu nam ju patam ji gam jitu ma gashin ya chlu jin gam yorwa ngene dan ji thola tendi yana chunin do ji cha ge boina ko mare bul tenin de ze ma jugor ma ta ya yung ma wa jesan tin de na kunni nyomo be tenin jung tong de da nan ji bu gam to ni bo de loka cha so de na lugdu ji gam se ke go yores.
那为什么
And then here, the reason why we call this way of meditating in the reverse order, why is it reversed? It is because when all these realized practitioners, all these yogis are meditating upon the 12 independent links in this way, then they start by the last one and then go upwards. And so the order through which these practitioners meditate on the 12 independent links goes in the other way, and then in the way that the samsara is produced, and so the natural occurrence of these links. And because it goes in the opposite direction, in the reverse direction, then we call this way of meditating upon these 12 links the reverse order.
Oh, that day, Chukun, Juchong, said you could take a Tendi and like Unique Nyomo take Gomram Deres. Ta, that dark Judo Tango, but Nam Jung Gomram de Nata, Mishi Shirachi, let how this.
And so this is the way of meditating upon the passage in the Dharma mantra that says all phenomena that are produced by causes. And so this is meditating on the 12 links in the order of the production in the direction of the samsara. And so this is the way of meditating upon that. And then the next one, which is the cessation of themselves and their causes. And so here we are talking about the 12 independent links that leads toward, or that lead to liberation. And so here again, it's not something complicated to meditate upon this type of 12 links.
Tata di lugdu tendi lugdu di gamba te goba sobo de donha ge tawa te maribu yimba hako ge cheder res.
And so the main reason for which we are going to meditate upon the reverse order of the 12 independent links that lead to samsara is in order to identify or to know clearly that what actually produces all the rest is ignorance.
다 룩두 검 말이다 남종 그때의 검 뒤때나 영 검동데 tombo 마릭바 딱 카스 tombo데 마릭바라 때니 도젠종레스 검고요라 티코니 요모블로 요로다 마릭방가 마릭바 뽕야나 되는 도제 뽕가로 그레스 페나 메메나 토와 메로와 디나게 마릭바 맨 가서나 도제 가로 그레스 도제 가나 남신 가로 그레스 남신 가나 민종 가그레 민종 가나 체첸 가그레스 다 tindi지 투섬 이동 숨의 연의 감동들 남종지 때문에 롱종수 감 세계레스
那另外一种呢，
And then the next, when it comes to meditating upon the 12 links that lead to liberation, and then it is in the following way. So before we had seen that from ignorance arises a formation. And so it is true by relying on ignorance that formation arises or appears. And so here in this way of meditating upon the 12 links towards liberation, we're going to say that from ignorance, by abandoning ignorance, then formation also ceases. And so just in the same way that if you don't have any fire, there cannot be any smoke. And so if ignorance, if we abandon ignorance, then the formation ceases. If we abandon formation, then the next elements, etc., until name and form, and then all the others are also going to cease.
다 tindi지 감발 때는 타도 남종게 텐디긴 레우 타도된 고대인 바테 또 용그레스 그반다니나
And so by having meditating upon the 12 links this way, by seeing that once we get rid of ignorance, then all the others they cease to exist, or they stop existing. Then the purpose of meditating on the 12 links in this way is to see that actually abandoning ignorance gives as a result the cessation of suffering. The truth of the cessation of suffering.
다 남종 그 텐디 룩두스 감 세지데 당귀 다다 텐디 연락 주니 그때 포버번 징드나 던
老祖。那然后呢，讲到环灭的查求方式呢？
And now, in order to meditate upon the 12 links in the direction of liberation in the production order,
다 tindi지 감발 때는 타도 다다 남종게 텐디긴 레우 타도된 고대인 바테 또 용그레스 그반다니나
this one we had already seen.
方式呢？
다 감동데 간니 감그는 고수야데 페나 쭈킥 도와 쭈킥 제와사사지 도와드니 제와된 가서나 가신 가그레스
那比如说，
스파든 가나 제왕 가는 그레스 램바든 가나 스판 가그레스 스판 가나 램반 가그레스 나땅 렘바르긴 텐디지야 종아텔 남주지 텐디 루도스 감세 그레스
And so on the meditating on the 12 links that lead to liberation in the reverse order is looking at the birth, for example, the 11th, and saying if birth ceases, then aging and death, the 12th, is also going to cease. And then if becoming ceases, then birth is going also to cease. If grasping ceases, becoming will cease. If craving ceases, grasping will cease, etc. And then so going upwards in this way, each time seeing that abandoning the previous element, previous link is going to have as a result the disappearance of the next one.
第囊中嘅共當
텐데 루두스가
루도
大空的남중嘅텐데 룽중래서 다 루두도 감스.
那换
And so the translator just wanted to make sure that he understood properly that it was meditating upon the 12 links that lead to liberation in the reverse order.
다 텐데 텐데 룽중도 루두 텐데 그 텐데 연락 주니 그 단다 땡 단데게 생데게 땡여레스.
And so it is until here, everything that we have said is what is presented in the verses that say all phenomena that arises from causes and the cessation of themselves and their causes. And so these words from the Dharma mantra are presented actually this meditation on the 12 links. Okay, so we covered the 12 links, and so now the next part is the Four Noble Truths.
세상 들리 있잖아. 드링 데히마 슈디잖아. 담보텔라 년투지 람렌도 덤베 뎀바이에 생데가 마텐소당 니바텔라 롱지지 람렌도 덤베 텐디엔라 주니 kunyo nyomo bu tendi la juni namjong ge tendi la juni tang hyechu tang tene dadan sumba de la tichi tumo mai be tawa tenjin denjo ge tenso de he tendi jine sabje sam tekki dada de shulo ge jigla sabje sam yani he tang som jin ma hu yins.
And so here actually this was the very beginning of Campbell's lecture. So he's saying here that when commenting these four verses, he's going to first explain them according to the gradual path of the Shravakas, according to the Four Noble Truths, then according to the gradual path of the Pratyeka Buddhas with the 12 independent links, and then he would present according to the gradual path of the middle of the great vehicle, Mahayana, that presents it as interdependence and emptiness.
Teni independent ta tambo chu kong jujung teda ke judong tengu koyin pang de yi hi pe ka de gezong chimbe de kesong ki ba ke sik de ke demba yete ma demba yete ten du tenso de ma hugins.
So Campbell says now that when we read these four verses that say all phenomena that produce are by causes and the cessation of themselves and their causes, this has been taught by the Tathagata, and this is how the great renunciant, this is what the great renunciant explains. And so Campbell says that he's going now to explain that according to the Four Noble Truths.
Teni chu kong juchong sejuteke chu kong seateke dongha demba juchong seju jola teni chu de chongre se chepeke juteke kunju demba demba res chu kong juchong sejute.
And so we have at the very beginning, we have all phenomena that are produced by causes. And so when we read all phenomena, what this refers to the noble truth of suffering, and then that are produced by causes refers to the truth of the cause of suffering.
대다게 규당 댕고 공인바 스테지티케 고페 뎀바다 람티 뎀바님부터 땡여레스.
And then the cessation of themselves and their causes is presenting both the truth of cessation and the truth of the path.
Tendi in sana pena chu kong juchong sejiti chu kong sayate donghal demba chegu yuditana donghal demba sejiti kandichila labu yure siyon sana tang ngazong khosong khowa ke nyene je phombola mimi jungwi ke dongha je dongha yure dongha chabano je dongha se namji shedo juke duba teda phamjila dongha demba se tendi gogo gres.
And so when we say that when it says all phenomena, what is being referred to is the truth of suffering. How should we understand here this truth of suffering? Well, it is the fact that when we are reborn in either of the three realms of samsara, and we have suffering that is produced on the basis of our physical form, whatever that is, then there are three types of suffering that are produced. The suffering is produced in three different ways. It is either suffering of suffering, suffering of change, or omnipresent suffering. And so this is what is meant by the truth of suffering here in this context.
Teni chukung juchung se juti kunjung deba tengo te kunjung deba se karela la kurchina ta da me pala da nan zembe ke danzing ti kuni nawa ke teni nyomong de ja hedana soba ke kuni nyomo ba te tang ti nyomong ti kuni nawa ke le ti nyimbo te la kunjung se dongha ti le dong nyomo ba juti la teni chumbare se sheyores.
And then when it is said that are produced by causes, it refers to, or it is talking about the truth of the cause of suffering. And so this truth of the cause of suffering here is the fact that where there is no self or I, then we cling to it as self and the I. And so the clinging that results is going to be the cause of us having negative emotions and negative actions. And so these negative emotions are attachment, aversion, and ignorance. And then through these negative emotions, then we have actions that follow. And so both together, the negative emotions and the actions that are produced through them are referred to commonly as the truth of the cause of suffering.
Tene chukung gyusong se dongha damba te kunyu damba li chongre se suke heba re sena teji hipe kata teji hipa ke te sungba re so.
And then who is presenting that all phenomena that arise from causes, all phenomena are arisen from causes? Who presents that? Then it is the Tathagata who teaches that.
Tene deda ke jutong tengu koyin pa sengo di tena deda ke sa deda te dongha damba deda ke ju se dongha damba te ke ju kunjung damba te ten go se sa te pa pang ten go ken te pang sana go bu damba re go bu din de tendi je ngue su tendi je go din te ma re.
那这里
And so what comes next afterwards in the verse is the cessation of themselves and their causes. And for themselves here is referring to the truth of suffering, and their causes is the truth of the cause of suffering. And when both of these cease, so the cessation of themselves and their causes, when both of these cease, then it becomes the truth of cessation. So when we abandon these two, the cause of suffering and the truth of suffering and truth of cause of suffering, then we reach the truth of the cessation.
Teni ta teda dunha teda da dunha ge judo je pa ten go se ate te pa pong na go pa da nyang ni lin de pa tan tharwa se de togu yore stendu yang teda ke judong ten go par je pa se tan pa se ki go se ate go je la jar yong du te dal te ke lam ji de ma te ma res.
And then when we take these words in a slightly different way, instead of saying the cessation of the themselves and their causes, if we say they cease, so themselves and their causes cease, so making into an active verb, so Tibetan language allows to do that. And so if we do that, if we take it that way, then instead of having the cessation, which means the truth of cessation, then we have the truth of the path, which is what is going to make themselves and their causes cease. And so it is in this way that this verse is presenting the truth of the path.
Tene dunga demba te tang teda tang te ke ju go pe ke tharwa te thupra se ke ju te lam je demba te teda ju do je bang go se te res ne te te ma res.
Yeah, and I forgot to translate that. Once we are able to get rid or to make cease both the suffering and the causes of the suffering, then what we obtain is the cessation, which can be also called the nirvana, so beyond suffering, or a liberation as well. And so when we are able to apply what will make suffering and the causes of suffering to cease, and we reach that liberation, then that is what is called the path.
Tene dunga teda tang teda ke ju dong go pa te go de yin ba ta teda ke ju do je bang go se te lam je demba te suk song ba re se na gezong chimbu te ke song se gezong chimbu se song ye lo song re song ye ke te ni song yu re se ne o ke ja te ni she yu re sa.
And then the fact that the cessation, so the cessation of themselves and their causes, and how to make themselves and their causes to cease. So both of these, who is telling it, who is presenting it, expounding it, and then it is the great renunciant. And so we have here the last verse, which says, and this is what the great renunciant exposes.
O tati ke dunga demba teng kunyo demba junde tendi te korwa ke dipi ke junde tendi te tempare godin ta lamdin te junde te tharwa ke dipi thar lam junde tendi te tem himbo te danda te den tendi chine tenyores te boche.
And so this is how the Four Noble Truths are presented through this verse in two pairs of cause and result. The first pair of cause and result is how the suffering and the causes of this suffering is produced. So the cause and the result of the suffering and its cause. And the second pair is how the cessation and its cause, the path, are happen or occur. And so it is through these two pairs of each time one cause and one result that the Four Noble Truths are presented.
Tene de tat tombo ke ja tombo she de dangel janima tenhon de shedu to som le lawre par stranga de ye ma to merwa donga de ba kunyo de ba ti Chu Kong said Donga Demba, Joe said the Kunyo Demba Tengores, Dili Chongres, Tada Tang take Jung Gober Seba take Gopate, Godin Gozete, Lamdin Teres, Golam de Demba Jutens, Nimbate. Ndekayong Tendi and La Juni, Tendi Kunin Yomo Tendi and La Juni, Namjung Tendi and La Juni, the man take Tengores.
那刚才
And so that was the first explanation of these 4 verses, the first one that explains it through the Four Noble Truths. And so this is rather easy because there's only 4 things to worry about. We can easily say that all phenomena is referring to the truth of suffering, and then that that are produced through causes. This refers to the truth of the cause of suffering. And then that which makes themselves and their causes cease is referring to the truth of the past, and the cessation of themselves and their causes is referring to the noble truth of cessation. And so this is rather easy. And then now we're going to look at them to explain this through the 12 indeterminate links. Yeah. So we have covered his whole explanation now. And yes, I just wanted to add something. We're already 10 minutes late according to the schedule. I don't want to get too late today because otherwise we won't have enough time for lunch for those who are in Europe. But I just wanted to kind of bring to your attention that the explanation that he has given through the Four Noble Truths are actually quite helpful in translating, because they show clearly that when we say all phenomena that are produced by causes, we know that there are 2 different things that we are talking about. And then when we say the cessation of themselves and their causes, we know also that there are 2 other separate things, and then we identify them as well. And so we have through this explanation of the Four Noble Truths, we have the references behind these pronouns, themselves and their causes. And that helps in translating the words of the verses. Yeah. So I don't know if you have any questions, or stop sharing now. Questions or yeah. And then before we go on, if any of you have to leave or want to go to lunch or anything, don't feel free to leave right now, because anyhow it's going to be recorded, and then so you can you can take the pause as you should. Yes, please.
I was wondering, can you hear me, Drupchin, there?
Yeah.
I was wondering because Kempo was talking about yogis that practice 12 independent link.
Yes.
And so the cause of suffering, according to of course, to all Buddha's teaching, but to the 12 independent links is ignorance. And as he said, there are 2 types of ignorance. One is the ignorance of the nature of phenomena, but this is quite different in the nature of phenomena is different in every school, I mean philosophical school, right?
Yes.
So, but Tibetan Buddhism adopt like Madhyamika, most of the schools, right? But the others, how is this?
Yes.
I mean, I think, well, I guess that there's a difference in the way that maybe in Tibet is practiced, in Tibetan Buddhism is practiced the 12 independent links, and in other.
I don't think so, actually, because we're still talking about like Theravada Buddhism, whether maybe it's not the right word, maybe it's not political, yeah, whatever the case, Hinayana or Theravada Buddhism. So, and because of that, then it needs to be practiced according to its own tradition.
Okay.
And this is something that Tibetans maintain. And there's this story about Losao Rinchen Zangpo, who, when Atisha asked him what he understood from the different levels and different schools, etc., he answered everything, and Atisha said, well, there's no need for me to come to Tibet because there's someone who knows as much as I do. There's no need. On the side of theory, then you know everything that should be understood, so there's no need for me to come. And then Atisha went on to ask him, so all of this, how do you practice? And then Losang Rinchen started to say, okay, when it comes to Theravada practice, we do it according to the Vinaya in the lower kind of floor of the temple. And then the lower tantras we do in the highest floor in the next the floor right on top of it, according to that, etc. And then he really kind of said that he practiced everything separately. And so it's not that Tibetans join everything. They also do that way. But then, this is how it is done. Yes, this is preserved in Tibetan Buddhism. But then Atisha, when he heard all that, he says, well, if you reach the higher level and you don't join it with the practice of the lower levels in your mind, then something is wrong. And so he said that because of that, then he said, you Lotsawa, you're rotten. And so he said, well, there was definitely a purpose for me coming to Tibet because the way of practicing is not correctly understood. And so what my point is that Tibetan tradition maintains the order of what to practice, but when someone reaches the higher, then we explain to that person that he needs to integrate the lower practice into the higher one. And so when Khenpo Chendoje was talking about these 12 independent links, when he's going to explain it, he's going to maintain it in the context of Theravada. And so there's no, and when he's talking about yogis as well, he's talking about yogis from the literal point of view, meaning someone who is practicing the truth of how phenomena exist, or the true way of being, or existing of things. So Nal means the true way of how things exist. And so here in this context, when he talks about yogis, it is realized practitioners of the Theravada, not any higher level. Yes. So yes, and then when here he was talking about that, so it means that when we talk about this ignorance about how phenomena, about the nature of phenomena, we still need to understand it from the point of view of the Theravada in the context of here what was it? It was the 12 independent links. So according to the second school of Hinayana, which is the South Tantrika. Yeah. So we really need to compartmentalize and say, okay, we are in talking about 12 links, which means we are in Theravada. Out of them, we are talking about the Pratyekya Buddhas, and so because of that, we are in the second philosophical school.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Drupchana.
Yes.
I just have one question, because when you talk about these 12 interdependent links, and then you arrive into two categories, right?
Yes.
The cause and the results, right? So the ones that are related to the results, just because I just want to make sure that I have is the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 11th, and 12th.
3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, yes, 11th, 12th, yeah, that's right.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, actually, you can see that in the commentary of Nagarjuna on these 4 verses.
Okay.
In the document that is linked in the previous PowerPoint.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other thing that I can help with? Not then maybe we make a pause, and then after we meet again for the second session. Okay, thank you. See you later.
Thank you. Thank you so
When
much.
do we meet? What time? Is it in an hour or?
Yes. It is at I think 2 o'clock in Spanish time. It isn't in the WhatsApp group. It's same time as last week.
Okay.